All right. In today's knowledge-based tutorial, we're going to be reviewing finalization. To get to finalization, you must first complete the previous video by setting up your baseline primers and initialization. As a reminder, baseline primers are the behavior settings that are more needed for a human to review that's outside of learning mode because they're behavior changes. And initialization is going to be where you take the learning mode and you tell Senteon what will change or what disruption might happen if I harden to this image, which gets us to this final stage of setup, finalization, where we can now harden the machines that have been initialized and make real decisions on security risks we want to accept or security risks we want to eliminate. Again, another way to access this path I showed you via Action Center. We can also go to Setup and click Finalization from there. Okay. Let's get into setup, and I'll try not to move my face icon around that much. All right, finalize the endpoints. First thing you'll notice is a variety of categories. I'll break these down one at a time. The first category we'll discuss is variable compliance settings. These are findings of things that are not on the system by default. They're special programs or features that are needed on a specific use case. But if these programs or features are present, it will change the recommendation on how to secure the policy that's affecting it. Okay, let's dive in. So you can see on this example, we have affected endpoints of 2s and 1 and 2. And we can more importantly see that there is a program or feature that is present. So again, these are not present by default. So this is a finding because we didn't expect to see that. So now we need the security engineer to go, yep, you know what, IIS is actually approved at this site. So let's go ahead and keep IIS present because this is critical to business operations. So I'll go ahead and select all that have the IIS, and I'm going to choose our safe button, current endpoint. Current endpoint is effectively going to say, hey, thank you for letting me know. Senteon, just leave it how you found it. Just enforce that present state. The alternative option I could have here is I could select all of the IIS and do unmanaged, which was explained in the previous video, but this basically means Senteon, take it outside of scope, do not report on this policy. This is not part of our responsibility. And this will allow the policy to drift, to change. This will not be enforced by Senteon. But again, for this example, best practice is always going to be to leave to current endpoint. If that is the choice you want. Best practice is, of course, to harden that to the recommendation. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at a policy that we didn't expect to see. For example, one of the 3 devices has a Linux subsystem that was found on a Windows workstation. Now, that's peculiar. Let's go ahead and do a little research and determine whose machine that is. So we can see here that we identified the Senteon demo hostname has this present and is set to manual. So now we have contextual awareness and we need to make a decision on if we want to harden or leave that how it is. Moving myself out of the way, we can now select the machine and we can make a determination. Yes, we want to control this policy, and yes, we want to harden that to eliminate the security risk. Alternatively, if this was critical to business operations and is a real exception this machine needs, we could set it to manual and we can document that reason. So document the reason, include reporter and approver for best practice. So now you're going to have a exception built in, and I'll go ahead and leave that exception so I can show the exception group process later. Cool. So I'll move my camera a little bit back. And now we can see that this screen is complete and we do have our annotation documented. So you can see settings awaited decisions is 0 and all the target decisions have been filled out. Now we only addressed the machines that had a finding present. We also need to account for the inverse because we are onboarding 3 devices in this demo. So you can see here the exact inverse. Here's all the other things we checked for: Hyper-V, computer browser, ICS, FTP, all right, everything else. And it's all affected endpoint count is 3, except when we get to the inverse. These are things we already addressed in the previous screen. Because all of the other devices have this programmer feature absent, we're going to go ahead and select all and harden that to the recommendation, which which is primarily not installed, but this is going to be the best practice because they're not using it, so why give them access to something they don't need? Perfect. All right, the next category is pre-configured settings. You can see we did try to break this up for a little bit of streamlined behavior into essential, optional, and other, and already compliant findings. Essential, as you might imagine, are the most notable findings that could impact business operations, but are critical security risks we highly recommend to harden if possible. Okay, let's go ahead and review this. So you can see here, we're going into access, and we can see one of those three devices all have audit pull policies all set to no auditing or just failure. If I was a security engineer looking at this, I would first be concerned because what set this to no auditing when the default behavior is simply not configured? So this means it was intentionally set this way. Someone, something at some point in time turned off the audit pool policies. Best practice, if you are using a log or SIM, a log aggregator, SIM, SOAR, whatever that is, consult with them on what these policies should be set to. It's very likely they'll want these policies set to success and failure. If you do not have a log aggregator, I would recommend to follow what CIS recommends because their recommendations assume you don't have one. To do that, you simply click recommendation and we are going to remediate those policies for you, put those back in place. Now, let's say you come across a policy that you're not familiar with. We'll take act as part of the operating system is set to everyone. I don't know what that is, but it sounds pretty dangerous. So we're going to go ahead and click modify. We can click into the setting name, and we can now understand the pathway, which this tells me it's a user rights assignment. And we can learn that it is a sensitive privilege that is extremely powerful. I like to say this is effectively an user in disguise as an admin. An admin in disguise as a user, if I can say my analogy correctly. All right, moving on past that, you now have contextual awareness as to the behavior of this, and more importantly, you can see that the default is no one and the recommendation is no one. So I highly recommend if you come across this policy to very simply eliminate the security risk. It's not worth the exception. There's no good use case for a user to have access to this, let alone everyone. Now, same as before, we're going to go through. I know these are a couple more user rights assignments. I'll harden those. And you can see these here. Well, this is also a user rights assignments, but maybe I want to keep that one, right? I don't want to risk it, right? This might be something that requires additional memory, needs to steal from other applications. I don't recommend it, but maybe this is something you're a little too nervous about. SMB1, right? There's likely some deprecated equipment leveraging SMB1 in this environment. So you're going to play it safe here. We're going to go ahead and take these three policies and we're going to say, you know what? Let's go ahead and leave these how I found it. I'm not going to harden these policies. I'm going to leave it how I found it. And you can see current option will now match target decision. Cool. And just like before, we have now completed this screen. So we're going to move on. Optional. Very similar. This is a finding on two of the boxes that they have the admin account status. We, of course, want to disable that. And then we have other. As a note, you may come across blank current options. This means the reg key has been wiped out, most commonly due to a Windows update. Believe it or not, Windows updates will clear your reg keys and not put them back. Okay, so in cases like this, I highly recommend to put that reg key back. And then we have compliant, but pre-configured. So these are findings that are technically compliant with CIS, but are not explicitly set to what CIS recommends. So you can see we have the guest account, deny logon locally. CIS is going to recommend that we change that to guests. But more importantly, what we're changing that to is a standardized SID value across all of the devices. That way, they're not all different and you can scale. Further, we have the message title for users attempting to log on. It's set to a blank reg key. In reality, this one's a little different because I know this is a message text and this is a couple space bars. So it is actually compliant because CIS says something is there. But again, you may consider doing the recommendation and inputting a real warning label as opposed to just a couple space bars to get the checkbox. Awesome. Moving on, we have settings with detected conflicts. So you can see here we have one finding on one of the devices. So this example is with personal Microsoft accounts. This has no impact to Azure, anything Entra, or anything else. So these are personal Microsoft accounts being used. And we can see here we have one finding. Let's go ahead and do a little due diligence. We can see here that it's this hostname that is utilizing the policy, and we can see that there is a conflict. So we're going to go ahead and learn a little bit more. Senteon will provide you the actual context as to why we found a conflict and why we have a high conviction changing this will cause disruption. So you can see the SID value along with the display Z Hackerman. Now, if I was looking at this, I would have to make a decision. I would say if I'm prioritizing uptime, if I cannot risk causing disruption, then I have to do what I have to do. I'm going to make a business exception. I'm going to leave this to the current state, which is not defined, non-compliant, and I'm going to document. Alternatively, which again, highly recommended here, we should be eliminating the risk and hardening that policy. And if we want to, maybe give a quick email, a quick reach out to assure they know how to sign on with the appropriate process. This outlined real risk that you were not, very likely, not aware of going into this. Cool. So we'll go ahead and apply. And I'll move myself back to the screen. All right, moving on. The last category that we need to look at is high priority settings. These are going to be policies that are the most beneficial to the results in your pen test, right? These are the most commonly abused, most high priority settings to eliminate real risk. You will notice some of these may sometimes be pre-filled out. That's because these are already set to the compliant state. So you'll notice 1s, 3s, right? Because we have to address all of the machines. You'll notice 1s here and a 2 here, right? Because the other 2 don't have this already compliant. Now, based off of our learning mode, these settings should be safe, but these, again, are just so sensitive. We always recommend to just go through this list, give them a read, and make sure you are also confident that these are okay. If disruption does happen, there is a single-click undo button so that we can roll this back very quickly. But again, take a read through. Most of our partners are actually okay with this screen, but we'll always give a read through and approve this manually. Awesome. And the very last section we need to look at, high priority optional. We will see a few more settings, calling out the personal Microsoft again. We address the one machine, but we need to address the other 2. Again, we have to address all of the machines, whether you're onboarding 5 machines, 500, or 5,000. We need to address all of the machines during onboarding. And the very final section we don't need to look at. These are the other 500 plus policies Senteon has already ran a learning mode on and determined you do not need to provide further review for us to change those policies. We have a high enough conviction that these will be perfectly safe to change. All right, moving on. We'll finish that setup. We've now done the manual portion of setup, and now we just need to do some naming. So this is the last chance to do any reviews, any edits, anything you want. Purposes of this, I'm going to move right along and hit continue. Now I'll be asked to name the exception group. So you will notice one of the 3 devices has the exception group that includes IIS and SMB, WDigest, and whatnot. So we're going to name this exception group EX1. We'll do 12 so I don't have any duplicates. Oh, there we go. That is already a duplicate. So we're going to do EX122. Imagine a cybersecurity platform that cares about your own platform hygiene. All right, so now we can go ahead and see that there is a second exception group that is very similar. It does have IIS, but it doesn't have the SMB or the other exceptions. So this does get its own exception group. So we can name this one EX. Let's see if I can do a non-duplicate. There we go. And now we're at the final screen. You can see this machine had no exception groups, so it actually met the golden image perfectly that we set out to meet. And the other machines have their exception groups. At this point, we can choose to activate, which will change the policy. Alternatively, we can hit delay, and that will change no policy at this moment, but it will save our work. So let's go ahead and hit delay. You'll see here, when you're ready, all of those ones that we just delayed populate in activation pending. So when you're ready, you could harden all 3 devices all at once. Alternatively, if you need to take a slower activation rollout, you can always go ahead and look at the machines here, and you can activate them one at a time. So now you can see the other two are not hardened, but the other two is beginning to go through hardening. To get back to that screen we were just on, you can see finalization here, and we can see the other two boxes are still waiting to be hardened, and I want to do both of those at once, so I'll hit activate. And you will see now, those are now being applied, and if I head over to endpoints, you should see the three machines we just went through the process with are now applying changes. That can take about a minute, depends on resources available, but typically it doesn't take too long. All right, in the next video, we'll review some of the things you can do post-activation, post-hardening, and we'll go into that. All right, thank you very much.